Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think Senator Cruz will be on the way here in a bit. So May 11th is a nightmare date for the American people, particularly the people in Mexico and Texas. What's going to happen is that the Biden administration is going to repeal the use of Title 42 authority to expel people. This is not deportation. This is expelling. It's the ability to tell somebody you have to go back home because of Title 42 concerns. That goes away on May the 11th. So where are we? In the past 90 days, there have been 566,163 border encounters with illegal immigrants, 6,300 a day. Where are we headed? Here's the estimates. If you repeal Title 42, there will be a surge, and here's what DHS says. It goes from 6,300 a day to 10 to 13,000 a day. So in the next 90 days, you're going to be from 900,000 to 1.1 million. That's what's coming. If you repeal Title 42 on May the 11th, you're basically doubling the problem. It's just not Republicans concerned about this. These are news outlets reporting what is to come after May 11th. Every news organization in the country pretty much sees this the same, that there's going to be a dramatic increase in illegal crossings because people are sitting in Mexico waiting to May 11th. They're amassing by the thousands, knowing that when May 11th comes, it's much easier to come into the country and not get expelled. These are Democratic mayors who are saying we're overwhelmed. This is just not a Republican party. These are mayors of Washington, Chicago, New York, begging the Biden administration to change course and change policy. This is affecting the entire country, not just border states. But if you're in Texas, you're on the tip of the spear. Brownsville, Laredo, and El Paso have declared states of emergency because they know what's coming May the 11th. These cities are being overrun. They're having more capacity than they can handle. Crime is up. Disruption in these cities is just really out of control. I'll turn it over to John here in a second. He can talk better about Texas. But to the Biden administration, what the hell has to happen for you to change policy? At what point are you going to take this seriously? At what point are you going to rise to the occasion? America is under siege here, and you're sitting fiddling while everybody is burning in America. So what we hope to do is to beg and plead with this administration. I've asked Democrats to join the effort to not repeal Title 42 May the 11th. It's been used 2.3 million times to expel people who came here illegally. That authority goes away next week. So it's not like it doesn't matter. It's been used by the administration probably more than any tool in the toolbox, and they're taking out of the toolbox one of the most effective tools they have to deter illegal immigration. And come next week, all hell is going to break loose along the border and eventually will flow into the interior of the United States. About solving illegal immigration. John and I have sat down with Democrats for over a decade now trying to fix this problem. This is a self-inflicted wound by the Biden administration. They have the power to continue this policy. They have the power by executive action to keep people out of the country when they want to claim asylum. They repeal the Trump policies that led to the lowest illegal crossings in December of 2020 in recent history. It was a choice they made. This has got nothing to do with Congress acting or not acting. This is a conscious decision by the Biden administration to take a tool out of the toolbox that's been very effective, and it's going to lead to holy hell. It's going to lead to just a crushing of the border cities that are already under siege, and Democratic mayors are begging the Biden administration to change course. We're begging them to change course, and I am hoping that our message will get through, but time will tell. Senator Cornyn knows this as well as anybody, better than most.
Well, I appreciate my friend Senator Graham for arranging this press conference. He's exactly right. What is currently a flood of humanity coming across the border is getting ready to become a tsunami. And because the tool that the Biden administration has used, Title 42, the pandemic law, the public health law, is going to expire. And unless they put something else in its place to plug that hole, you're going to continue to see more and more people encouraged by the prospect of being able to successfully make it across the border into the interior of the United States. It is astonishing to me how many people in the Biden administration will lie about the severity of this problem, who will try to downplay it, like Secretary Mayorkas, who said the border is secure. Well, if the border is secure, why is President Biden sending 1,500 active duty military down to the border? When they can't enforce immigration law, all they can do is change diapers and push paper. In other words, under the law, they can only perform administrative functions. But this disaster has so many different effects. Just think for a minute about the 1.2 million gotaways, people that did not turn them in and claim asylum. If you claim asylum, you're going to be allowed to go to the interior of the country, perhaps never to be heard from again. So that's the reason people keep coming and saying the words they know they need to say, that they've been coached to say, to be able to successfully make their way into the interior of the country. Some places like New York, it's a 10-year wait before you can even begin immigration proceedings in front of an immigration judge. And then there's the drugs. 108,000 roughly American citizens died of drug overdoses last year. 71,000 of those fentanyl. I was in Carrollton Farmers Branch at a high school last week, listening to parents who were saying, you know, my child thought they were taking something like a Percocet or a Xanax, only to find out it was contaminated with fentanyl, basically a pencil lead. The tip of a pencil, a volume of fentanyl will take your life. That's why the Drug Enforcement Administration and others are trying to socialize the idea that one pill can kill. And then the last thing I'll mention is the unaccompanied children. Because of the way that unaccompanied children are treated under our system, effectively placed with sponsors in the interior of the United States, we know for a fact that Health and Human Services, that is in charge of that, has lost touch with tens of thousands of minor children. We're supposed to be protecting their safety. We're supposed to be looking after them. But the New York Times, for example, has run a couple of investigative stories pointing out that many of these children are being put into forced labor in violation of our child labor laws. Who knows how many of these children that the Biden administration has lost are in abusive family situations, been sexually assaulted, recruited into gangs. All of this comes down to the Biden border crisis and the Biden administration's conscious decision not to enforce current laws and refusing to work with reasonable people to try to come up with solutions. About a year, maybe 2 years ago now, Senator Sinema and I and Tony Gonzalez and Henry Cuellar introduced the Bipartisan Border Solutions Act, another bill that we thought that if this got bad enough, that the Biden administration, like a drowning person, would look for a lifeline to grab a hold of. And we wanted to provide them with a bipartisan, bicameral bill to begin that discussion. But they refused even that. So I appreciate Senator Graham taking the lead on this issue. This is a bad situation that's about to get much, much worse. And the answer is not 1,500 active duty service members. They didn't join the military. They go to the border and push paper and change diapers. But under the law, that's all they can do is perform administrative functions. They can't actually even enforce the immigration law. So this is a symbolic move that has zero meaning when it comes to changing the status quo. And we're here to say, if you think things are bad now, they're going to get worse come May the 11th. What is now a flood is going to turn into a tsunami.
I think Senator Cruz is on the way. Let's just wait a second. We'll go ahead and take
Maybe
one
answer
question.
some questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
For Senator Coyne, Jackson Merchant with the Epic Times. This morning, incoming Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson declared what he said are governors at the border that are not willing to collaborate when it comes to the migrant issue, and that these governors, like Governor Abbott, have sent migrants to cities like Chicago. What's your reaction?
Well, I would ask the question, what are the governors of border states like Texas supposed to do? And these border communities that are being overwhelmed. I think Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis and others who have bused migrants, that basically facilitated their travel to some of these cities like New York, Washington, and Chicago. They've done so in desperation, trying to gain the president's attention, thinking, well, he won't listen to Republicans, maybe he'll listen to Democrats, and maybe he'll listen to these mayors of these large cities. Senator Graham and I were just having the conversation. We are just completely baffled about what it will take to get the Biden administration's attention. If it's not the death of 108,000 Americans due to drug overdoses, if it's not forced labor for unaccompanied children placed in the interior, if it's not people, women and girls getting sexually assaulted in the travel from their home country into the United States in the tender care of the cartels and transnational criminal organizations, what will it take to get Joe Biden's attention? We're just completely bamboozled by their lack of attention to this. And maybe that will be something that will get somebody's attention someday. They run out of enough room, then maybe Joe Biden, they'll pick up the phone and call President Biden.
Senator Graham, can I ask specifically what you're asking the president to do? Because May 11th is the day that the public health COVID emergency is set to end. That's what gives Title 42 authority on the administration. So are you asking the Biden administration to put a new executive order in place that gives them the same authority Title 42 has, or something else?
Yeah, I'm asking them to find a acceptable substitute for Title 42. This is like being hit by a slow-moving truck in Kansas. This has been going on for like a year. Here we are next week, and they have no adequate substitute. So you're going to take off the table a tool that allows expelling 2.3 million illegal immigrants under Title 42, and you don't have an adequate substitute. That's the point. The COVID emergency ends, but there's things you can do. Trump did. That, like they're helpless, they're not. They've repealed policies at work because the left has forced them to make political decisions on the border that's putting our country at risk. The quality of life along the border communities in this country is being destroyed. And interior governors complain about reducing the quality of life of their states. What is Texas and these other states? What are they going to do? So, yeah, our plea is do something that gives you the ability to continue to deter illegal immigration. Just repealing Title 42 without adequate substitutes makes the problem worse. And I'll turn it over.
One of the things, one of the things that President Biden could do is use a law that was signed by President Clinton to provide for expedited removal. Of course, that doesn't fix the broken asylum system, which is another big component of this, but it would provide that adequate substitute that Senator Graham has mentioned. But I think none of us have any confidence in the Biden administration's commitment to enforce the immigration laws and to prevent this disaster from getting even worse.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have presided over the worst disaster at our southern border in our nation's history. This was not an accident. It was deliberate. It was the consequence of deliberate political decisions that have created this chaos. This crisis was caused by 3 political decisions made in the very first week of the presidency. Number 1, Joe Biden immediately halted construction of the border wall. Number 2, Biden reinstated the disastrous policy of catch and release. And number 3, Biden pulled out of the incredibly successful Remain in Mexico agreement. The consequence of those political decisions was catastrophic. We went from the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years, which is what Joe Biden inherited, what we had in 2020 under Donald Trump, success. And Biden and Harris came in and turned success into failure, not just failure, abysmal failure. They didn't just go back to Obama-level illegal immigration. They produced the worst illegal immigration our nation has ever seen. Over 6 million people have crossed illegally under Joe Biden. Last year, over 100,000 people died of drug overdoses, the vast majority of which was Chinese fentanyl streaming across the border under Joe Biden. And we saw just this week in Texas the horrific consequences. A mass murderer who in cold blood assassinated 5 people, assassinated a family, including an 8-year-old child. We now know that mass murderer was an illegal alien who had repeatedly entered the country illegally, who had been repeatedly deported. And yet, because under Joe Biden's open border policy, ICE is prevented from deporting dangerous illegal immigrants, he was here to commit that mass murder. That crime should never have happened. Those 5 people should still be alive. That child should still be alive. But the open border policies that Biden and Harris have put in place are causing misery and suffering and death every day. I spent a lot of time at the southern border. The same is not true for the president. The same is not true for the vice president. If you come down to the Rio Grande Valley, as John Cornyn and Lindsey Graham have many, many times, within minutes you see the human suffering that has unfolded. You see Texas farmers and ranchers showing you photograph after photograph of dead bodies of migrants they find that the traffickers have abandoned on their properties. A few weeks ago in Senate Judiciary Committee, Alejandro Mayorkas was testifying. I asked him, how many migrants died crossing the border illegally last year? He said, I don't know, I have no idea. Remember that the next time he tells you how compassionate he is. He doesn't even bother to know how many people his policies are killing. The answer is 853. I can tell you when we were down there, John and I together brought 19 senators down to the border. We were out on the Rio Grande. We saw a dead body, a man floating in the water who had drowned crossing illegally. I've seen women who've been violently raped by the cartels. I've seen children, little girls, little boys, horribly physically assaulted, sexually assaulted. What is happening is evil. And it's the result of deliberate political decisions. And now, next week, the Biden administration is going to lift Title 42, and here's their great plan. They're going to make it worse. They don't intend to fix it. They don't intend to stop it. They don't intend to shut down the cartels. They don't intend to secure the borders. They don't intend to stop the drug traffickers. They intend to make it worse. They want 6 million to become 10 million, to become 12 million, to become 15 million. And their actions demonstrate they don't give a damn about the lives that will be lost in the process. They don't care about the children assaulted in the process. They don't care about the drugs that are killing our children in this country. Nobody who looks at what's happening can defend it because it's indefensible.
Yes.
Senator Graham, where are you on the administration sending troops to the border? We heard from Senator Cornyn.
I think it's ridiculous theater. It will not change the outcome. They're not going to be there as soldiers turning people around. They're not going to be enforcing laws because of the Posse Comitatus Act. They're going to allow the Border Patrol to do more administrative work to process these people. They're not doing anything to deter the entry to the country. So it is political theater. It doesn't change the dynamic. I think what Senator Cruz said is, it comes a point in time, this is really deliberate. 60,000 people have been granted parole under this administration. That's a process under U.S. law that's meant to be used judiciously, where you have a review, there's a certain situation that would allow the person, they got to appear in court, they got a family member dying. I think during the Trump years, maybe 10 or 12 people granted parole, 60,000. So what am I going to do next? Well, these gentlemen from Texas, senators, were explaining to the country that next week's going to be a bad week and you could avoid it if you chose to. The 1,500 soldiers are not going to do a damn thing. But I intend to disclose and uncover, I think, a conscious abuse of the law to allow people in through a process that I don't think the law ever intended. So I think Exhibit A as to whether or not this administration wants to get as many people in the country as they can is going to be how they abuse the parole system.
Did you feel the same about it being theater when Trump sent troops to the border in 2018?
I feel that Donald Trump did the best job in my political lifetime. When Donald Trump did something, it worked. Everything he did, as Ted suggested, worked. The Triangle Agreement with the three Northern Triangle countries where they would process asylum claims took the problem off the table. You had the lowest illegal crossings in December of 2020, as Senator Cruz said, in 45 years. So I would suggest that if you want to compare the Trump performance on the border to Biden, it's an easy comparison to make. What am I urging the Biden administration to do? Because Trump did it doesn't mean you can't do it. Your country is being destroyed by illegal immigration. Your own democratic cities are being overwhelmed. As Ted and John have talked about, the human misery is beyond one's imagination. You can literally repeat what Trump did to gain control over the situation if you chose to. Now, why can't they do that? Because the radical left owns this administration. The parole policies are being pushed by people who want everybody in the world to come here. The change in border policy was driven by a group of people on the left of the Democratic Party that believes we should have open borders. And if you don't get that by now, you have missed a lot.
Let me add something on that. Look, sending troops to the border can have an enormous positive effect. There's no doubt boots on the ground matter, whether it is military troops, whether it is National Guard, whether it is Texas DPS officers, whether it's Border Patrol agents. Boots on the ground are an important part of how you secure the border. However, under Joe Biden, the 1,500 troops he's sending will accomplish nothing to secure the border, and they're not designed to, and here's why. The troops on the border are beneficial if you have a policy that when you apprehend someone, you deport them. Then the troops on the border are helpful for apprehending people coming across. As long as the Biden administration keeps in place catch and release, he could send 1,500 troops, he could send 10,000 troops, he could send 100,000 troops. It would do nothing to secure the border. Why? Because every illegal immigrant they encounter, they would hand over to the Biden administration, and the Biden administration would let them go. Actually, more than let them go, would put them on a plane or put them on a bus and take them to whatever city in America they want to go to. Joe Biden is the last mile of the human trafficking network. And to understand just how horrific it is, I'd encourage you to go back to Alejandro Mayorkas' testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, which all three of us vigorously questioned him at the time. And there was one moment in that questioning when I put up a poster board, and it had a series of pictures of colored wristbands. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Secretary, what are these colored wristbands? And his answer, he said, I don't know, I have no idea. I got to admit, that answer actually surprised me. Very little he said in that hearing surprised me. That answer astonished me. And my response to him, I said, Mr. Secretary, you have just told the American people that you are utterly incompetent at your job and you do not even care about doing it. Why? Because just about every illegal immigrant who crosses the border has one of those colored wristbands around their wrist. If you stand on the banks of the Rio Grande, as I have, as Lindsay has, as John has, you'll see hundreds, you'll see thousands of colored wristbands in the grass. For him to say he didn't know what they are tells me he's never stood on the banks of the Rio Grande. He's never even bothered to ask the Border Patrol agents, hey, what's going on here? The colors on the wristband correspond to how many thousands of dollars the illegal immigrants owe the cartels. Virtually all of them come in massive debt to the cartels. And the color coding, look, for the cartels, these are not human beings, these are cargo. That's how they treat them. And you have teenage boys who come in, they owe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to the cartels. The Biden administration sends them to your city, whatever your city is, they send them there. And those teenage boys are working for the drug cartels, and they have to work for the drug cartels because they'll murder their families back home if they don't. So every city in America is getting an influx of criminals working for the drug cartels, courtesy of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I'll tell you, as bad as it is for the boys, the girls have it a lot worse. There are thousands upon thousands of girls in sex slavery right now, in forced prostitution. I look at those wristbands as modern-day leg irons. And for the Secretary of Homeland Security to say, I don't even know what they are, tells you that he has not spent one day going into the office saying, I'm going to do my job today. Tell me what's happening at the border and how we stop it. He's not trying to stop it. The administration, rather, is trying to accelerate it and create even more illegal immigration.
One last question. Yeah.
I wanted to clarify what type of substitute authority you guys were looking for, because the Biden administration is reinstating expedited removal. Why is that insufficient? Some people say that.
Well, you know, all I can tell you is that we went from the lowest illegal crossings to the highest on record. They're talking about setting up processing centers inside Mexico and other countries, which is a good idea. Remaining Mexico worked. People are not going to pay a cartel $10,000 to sit in Mexico for 5 or 10 years. That's why it went to a trickle. The exceptions they have consume the rule itself. Unaccompanied minors are not, they don't have to comply with this. The rebuttable presumption, you can still show up at the border and be processed. So the bottom line here is that the processes that we know work were repealed for a political reason. Title 42 ends May the 11th, and we're here begging the administration, it is in your power to adequately substitute Title 42 authority. You've done nothing, from my point of view, and Ted knows this better than anybody, to provide an adequate substitute. So the reason 10,000 people in one city have gathered waiting for May the 12th is because they don't see an adequate substitute. People voting with their feet on the ground tell you they don't see anything replacing Title 42 they're concerned about. These surges would not be existing if they had found a way to replace Title 42 and communicate it to people. You're wasting your time and your money. So the fact that the surge is coming tells me they have made no corrective action, and Senator Cruz and I would gladly sit down with the administration and give them ideas about what they could do to stop the surge, but there's been no interest in their part. And
All right, thank you, guys.
thank you.